I very much related to Neil Young's Searching for a Heart of Gold, and he describes being a miner. I've been a miner searching for a heart of gold. So I often felt like I was fumbling in the dark, but I knew there was gold somewhere. I'm going to start with a favorite poem by American poet William Stafford. It's called The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. So, like with many poems, there could be a variety of associations, but for me that thread is, I guess, resonates with vision, this area of vision that we're exploring. And in this talk I'm going to explore how I let go of that thread for quite some time and how I reconnected with it, So when I was very young, I just remember a kind of vision, a very beautiful vision of the world, which is that everybody liked each other, were friendly, and there was real harmony. And I had this very vivid dream. I remember it. It was one of my earliest dreams. I still remember it. And my non-Buddhist name is Mary. And in the dream, I was Mary Melody. And I loved American musicals. So like in the American musicals, I'd be singing out to people and they would be singing back. And it was all everybody liked each other, and it was all very connecting and beautiful. I mean, I kind of laughed at the time, the name Mary Melody, but at the same time, there was something very, very beautiful about that vision of the world. But, I started, as we get older, started seeing the adults around me weren't acting in a very harmonious way. My mother in particular was very, very critical. I mean, I really wanted her to like people because I liked her friends, but she had quite a critical side to her. And so I used to find that quite painful, but that was in my immediate circle. And then, going further out into the world as I got older, I just have a vivid memory of influences of negativity, and one of them was being in a supermarket, and it was all white people, there was only one person of color, and I could pick up on this atmosphere of hatred, and I remember it very vividly, and I remember almost feeling poisoned by it myself, and I think it's only because my parents didn't buy into it, that I just, I went in a different direction. But, it kind of gives me a window into how people get poisoned in that way, in many ways. And so then you get older and you see a lot more of how the world is and the disharmony. And I guess for many people, who don't have that, it's a kind of rite of passage. So if we are lucky enough to have had supportive conditions when we were very young, we may have had that experience of child innocence. And I was just thinking that many, in the Buddhist tradition, a teacher is seen to be a very, very attained teacher when they have those transparent, childlike qualities. and even playfulness, and joy, and joy. It's one thing I love about when I came across Buddhism, is that it was so valued. And Dhardo Rinpoche, whose ashes are in that stupa, many of Sangharakshita's followers visited him in the 1980s. And there's a lovely book where they wrote about their experience of him. And they almost uniformly talked about this incredibly tender, transparent, childlike, loving quality he had. And he started an orphanage for children left without parents who fled Tibet. And the children just loved him because he was very, very playful. And this was a very highly attained, when he was discovered at age 5 to be a reincarnation of a great Lama, so he would have sat on thrones and had a lot of, veneration. But he just went beyond all that. And yeah, there are many teachers in the Buddhist tradition who are very appreciated for that. But as I said, if we've been fortunate enough to have had that period of childlike innocence, we do go through a type of rite of passage to experiencing how the world is not like that. And the Buddha himself went through that. And he wrote so he spoke so evocatively about it. It's always stayed with me because what he says is the world completely lacks essence. It trembles in all directions. I long to find myself a place unscathed, but I could not see it. Seeing people locked in conflict, I became completely distraught. But then I discerned here a thorn, hard to see, lodged deep in the heart. It's only when pierced by this thorn that one runs in all directions. So if that thorn is taken out, one does not run and settles down. So, yeah, I think that really spoke to me. It really brought back that kind of coming of age and rite of passage. But I saw it wasn't just the world around me. There was also a thorn in my heart. I really wanted things and didn't like it when people got in the way, and just did all the human things that's in our human natures. Things we don't like, things we want more of and grasp onto. I think we all have our particular tendencies. I think I tended to what's known as a hungry ghost in Buddhism. So a being with a big belly and a little mouth that just can't get satisfied, just can't get enough of what she wants. And that rite of passage that the Buddha described, it can be a turning point, but very few people take the unusual. There's like a path that he's described. He talks about the noble path and the ignoble path. So the ignoble path is, I guess, a bit of what I went to, which was I bought into what the world and the grown-ups around me were telling would make me happy. So trying to find happiness in the conditions of this world. And so some of them included career and finding the perfect partner and just looking at externals. And it's not that they can't bring some degree of happiness and satisfaction, but ultimately I could see through it. But the Buddha, at that young age, at that tender turning point, he went in the unusual path. He took the noble path. He could see through that every single thing, like what he said, the world lacks essence. So everything he was, you could grasp at, that people tell you would make you happy, it lacked essence. That it was impermanent, always changing. And he set off to find the answer to human suffering by seeking enlightenment, and had a breakthrough at quite a young age. But he was very heroic in his pursuit. So, as I said, I started looking at my own thorn. I think I got very lost and confused for quite some time. And and everything's a mix. So the career was more going into the area of wanting to become a lawyer and alleviate. Partly there was an altruistic, wanting to alleviate suffering through, making equal access for people to protection of their rights. And so there was that altruistic dimension. I thought law was a kind of power. That's the way I saw it, the power to affect change. And it's not that it can't be. It just wasn't quite me, true to me. But I also had this very egotistical thing that kind of fed into what the world was telling me, which was, I could be somebody, And I remember this, I guess these are kind of false visions that I had. So what this false vision, I remember again this, I could be someone of substance in the world. And I had this image of a gravestone with Judge Mary Clark on it. So that was a bit of an image I had at one time, which is a bit embarrassing. But, it just shows you what, there was a lot, there was a mix. As there was a mix in everybody. My mother was hypercritical, she was volatile, but she had a huge heart. So there's a mix in everything. But very confusing, just loads of things coming in. And I also thought some other person could make me happy. So I was kind of looking for, love in all the wrong places, and definitely led to a lot of suffering being thrown back on myself. So through that suffering, I started therapy, and I started picking up another thread that I had at an early age, which was to a strong spiritual connection to Catholicism when I was very young. But that thread kind of got shred or dissolved for various reasons. But through therapy, I started seeing, I had this thorn that was, I was creating my own suffering in a lot of ways. In fact, I saw that I was kind of creating my own prison. I kept thinking suffering was being caused by things out there. Was finding, I just couldn't, I didn't know what my true self was. I was acting in ways I just felt I had no control out of. I was wanting to express feelings that I had, but there was a tremendous block around it. And part of it was due to trauma, and many people have trauma, so there was that area to work through. But I just realized I didn't know who the heck I was, or I'd lost a significant thread in my life. And I also, I kind of went into the refuge of being nice and placatory, it was not very satisfying. I felt very cooped in. One teacher said to me I was like an iceberg, and that 90% of me was underwater, and somehow it couldn't break through. So therapy helped a lot. Also, a new thread started emerging that was connected with that original thread. And that was a certain knowing, a certainty that unlimited love and compassion was real, that it did exist, and that I needed to find it. That it was a beautiful yeah, I guess it was an ashaya, a sort of beautiful resolve that somehow in the world, well, there were bits of that in everybody, and most people I knew. I was lucky enough to have a grandfather who lived until I was my late 30s, and I think with grandparents we often can find unconditional love, and I very much had that with him, so that was one glimmer. But then, I started looking at spiritual teachers. I was very affected by Mother Teresa at a certain point. I mean, she became a bit of a controversial figure, but I was so moved at her wanting to, just indiscriminately walking the streets of abject poverty in Calcutta and supporting people to have a dignified death. There was something that really spoke to me. So around that time, I volunteered for a year in a hospice, hoping that maybe that would help me break through to some kind of answer and break through to that kind of love and compassion that Mother Teresa had. But, much as I valued that ideal, love and compassion, and, obviously there are songs, that's all the world needs, I just couldn't, I didn't know how to. I was well-intentioned, and I probably did do some good, as most well-intentioned people do. But that quality of that I just had glimmers of, that I sensed existed somehow in reality, I just couldn't, couldn't decide and take it for myself. So there was a lot more mysterious searching going on. At a certain point, I very much related to Neil Young's Searching for a Heart of Gold, and he describes being a miner. I'd been a miner searching for a heart of gold, so I often felt like I was fumbling in the dark, but I knew there was gold somewhere. And there were other spiritual figures like Yogananda from Diary of a Yogi, who really inspired me. And I got very inspired by a guru in a yoga ashram in Massachusetts and nearly joined the community. But I guess it's a cautionary tale that I think we need to look up to people. We need to revere and respect people. But sadly, he was very, he had serious flaws and left in disgrace. And I felt very, very sorry for the followers I knew of him, so I knew many people who joined it. So, I just kept searching. But on the way, I made significant friends, and some of the most significant friends were imaginary friends. And one of them is, I guess, the story of the Wizard of Oz. And I was always very moved by that story. So Dorothy starts out in Kansas in the film. It's in black and white, and she's very dissatisfied. She's very unhappy with life the way it is. And magically, through some kind of tornado, she ends into this world of magic and color. And then she realizes what she's lost, what she had. And she's trying to find a way back home. And she follows this yellow brick road. And I guess like me, she kept looking at externals, kept giving away her power. She thought the Wizard of Oz was going to solve it for her. And she made friends who also thought that all they needed to do was to see this wizard. And she had ruby slippers. And so her house landed on the Witch of the East, and because of that, she got the slippers. And she eventually discovers through Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, that she had this power all along to get home. and that, she was wearing it. She was part of her. And all she needed in the story was to click her heels. But yeah, that's very much resonated with, just looking within and the power we have when we look within. That's where our potency is. And we can lose heart in the world. There are famous verses of the Bodhicharvatara that talks about the power of good being weak and the power of evil being vast and terrible. But it can be overcome through the enlightened mind, through this power of following the truth, following our truth. And it is really potent, and it is really connected to a very, very beautiful vision. And we can see it realized in people. We can see it realized around us. I also had some other imaginary friends on this journey. So it's, we have to go on this journey. We have to visit some very dark, painful places in ourselves. But it helps to have a sense of humor. So one of the friends I made was, I call her Miss Tight Lips. So she's my perfectionist side, and often comes up when I'm looking in the mirror and she's got these tight-lipped, well, no, just completely inadequate, kind of inner, put-down voice. And then I also have this pious Mary. I think she's from the bad side of my Catholic upbringing. So she kind of stands in the shadow, probably in a church, and when I'm enjoying myself too much, or, she just, or I'm too big for my boots. She tells me I'm too big for my boots, and who am I to ... And then there's Igor. So Igor is this kind of, well, he was a Frankenstein assistant, so kind of a mechanical, he would kind of, I kind of see him as this kind of dumb figure that means well, but he's torturing people, maybe on the, because he's following the master, and it just feels like it's this automatic, habitual way I had in causing myself suffering, and it's hard to stop it unless we really start making friends with it. We can't bury it under the surface. So I started making friends with them. There's a wonderful approach to these kind of energies called working with your protectors, because they're kind of there to protect us at a certain point, but they kind of out, and at a certain point they were maybe effective. I think Igor is trying to keep me small and unnoticeable, and so is Pious Mary in lots of ways. And so in this practice of working with the protectors, you thank them for all the help they've given you, but then you invite them to take a holiday because they've worked so hard to protect you, and they've gone more on holidays in recent years. They come back for a visit now and again, but we're more in friendly terms. Sometimes they'll give me a hard time, but we're in a better place. So. Yes. So then, so I did a lot of this kind of searching. I'd say for a good 12 years. During that time, I learned to meditate. That uncovered a lot of things. I'm sure people find that. And then through a pretty disastrous marriage, I ended up in the UK. And when I kind of dusted myself off after the divorce, I realized what kept me sane was this thread of meditation and spiritual practice I've been developing on my own, but I couldn't find a spiritual group that quite fitted. And then, I came across Triratna in the mid-90s, and I realized, Sangharakshita was my teacher. I'd been in the dark and very, very confused, and what I loved about him was his clarity and the way he elucidated these very profound, wise teachings, and the fact that there is a yellow brick road. There is a path you can follow, and it will take you home. It will take you to places that you need to go to. And so at the same time, I met Amitabha. So Amitabha, his image is in the hallway. He's the second image there, and he's red. And these images in the hallway are archetypal, symbolic representations of the different aspects of the Buddha's enlightenment. And very coincidentally, Amitabha relates to the loving, unlimited love and compassion aspect of enlightenment. And so that color red, I was just thinking, like with Dorothy and the slipper, that red was very related to, very beautiful human love, her really, really seeing that she didn't really value the love, that everyday love she had in her life. But Amitabha's love is, something much bigger than that. It's quite transcendent, all-encompassing for all beings. Well, I'll come back to that. But and he very coincidentally relates to the realm of the hungry ghosts, and there are other very potent symbols to him. So, so what does this have to do with the verses of the Dhammapada? So, we're going to look at those last 4 of those 6 verses we've been looking at over the weekend. So, verses 3 and 4, he robbed me, he abused me. I think, how does that go? He robbed me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me. Those who entertain those thoughts will not still their hatred. And then he goes on to the next verse, that those who do not hold those thoughts will still their hatred. And, like with anything, it's important not to be too literal. He abused me, he beat me, he robbed me. Well, that's kind of, you could think, oh, well, I don't really go around thinking that. But it's really about blaming. It's about putting everything out there. It's about our tendency to see the world in terms of threat. And our tendency, and it also says it will not still their hatred. So, because I was very nice, I thought, well, no, I don't really hate people. But then when I started looking at this thorn that was making me run in all directions, well, I think a better word, I think we have all different associations with words. A better word might be animosity. I certainly cold-shouldered people, so I could have maybe a cold anger. I didn't forgive people, got irritated. I mean, even, really minor things, anything that could get in my way, like queuing for the bank machine. Somebody, you immediately have that little flash of animosity. And it's really interesting because it relates to human experience of pleasure and pain. So in the area of pleasure, somebody, if we're grasping onto it, holding onto it, thinking it's going to make us happy, and something gets in the way of that, and something out there. I mean, in my experience, I have a flash of animosity if I'm really, really intent on it. And with pain, the philosopher Spinoza, he talked about how, animals experience pain, but they don't go around blaming anything, or they don't hold a grudge. What they do is they kind of avoid where that pain might have been. But because human beings can reason, we come up with all sorts of narratives as to why it's somebody out there's fault. And Sangharakshita, I thought, there's this wonderful book called Living with Kindness, which I highly recommend. It's one of my favorite books by Sangharakshita. And one thing he talks about is, well, this seeing of the thread. It is obviously, it's kind of hardwired in us as humans. There's a physiological aspect to it. But there's something, it's, the Buddha would say it's a poison. It's part of the ignorance that we're born with, to see ourselves as a fixed, separate self. And we can't help it, really. But there is a path to transcend it. But what Sangharakshita says here is to identify with the self is to be susceptible to the arising of hatred. If we think in terms of karma and rebirth, we have been prone to hatred for as long as we have been embodied human beings. It is as though hatred was woven into the very fabric of our being. Since our first human birth, we have reacted with hatred to all those situations that threatened the integrity of our continued existence. We are afraid for our personal identity, our very sense of self, the sense of I, that enables a human being to interact and form relationships in ways that are much more complex than animals can. A threat to the self is a threat not just to our physical being or well-being, but to our psychological security. As long as you have a worldly personality, the potential for hatred will always be there. And you can detect it in yourself sometimes. A little flash of undiluted hatred, often when you least expect it. I don't know if you've had that experience, like you just be tootling along and all of a sudden there might be a flash of animosity or anger about something. Something our teacher calls a quantum of negativity. And I just wanted to give a caveat about, I guess if you know a bit about Buddhism, you might hear a lot of this talking about the self and self not existing. And it can be quite dangerous to misunderstand what that means. So we're not trying to obliterate our identity. We're just trying to get beyond our limitations of our narratives of who we are as a fixed self and as a quite defined self. In a lot of ways, we have to become more truly ourselves, more true to ourselves before we can get beyond into a much bigger self. So it's not about overriding who we are, because I've seen. Sadly, over time, I was once on a retreat where somebody who thought they had to completely blank themselves out and fainted, But it's quite easy to misunderstand that, so I just wanted to say that. So, yeah. So that hatred, though, that quantum of negativity we have, we also, that's only part of the picture. We have a great capacity to love. And I was just thinking of, the Wizard of Oz was a big story in my family for a couple of generations, in fact. And my sister and I memorized we used to be able to do it by heart. And I always got to play Dorothy because I was the oldest. But my sister used to literally think my mother had turned into the Wicked Witch of the West. And she was pretty scary in the film, if you've seen the film. But my mother had black hair, pale green eyes, and like an Italian aquiline nose. And, she would get into these, hot rages. And but in the film, she melts. So these things seem so big and powerful. Dorothy throws water on her, and to her surprise, she melts. And the thing about water is it's crystal clear, it's transparent, it's got the reflective, so it's kind of shining this kind of purity or truth onto something. And she melts and she softens. So, the witch was all pointy with a pointy hat. And, that's the way we can be when we're in a negative state. We can feel quite pointy and fixed and solid. And we can melt. We can open ourselves up, maybe connect with maybe a vision that we might have lost because of being disheartened by what we think of as the world. And going back to Amitabha, each of these archetypes have different symbols associated with him. So the peacock is associated with Amitabha, and it's theorized that it's because peacocks, in theory, can eat poisonous snakes and not die from it. In fact, I think one legend goes it makes the feathers more beautiful. And I really love that image because it's kind of, you're taking something and you're kind of digesting something. You're really trying to understand it in a certain way. And so he's kind of really facing in. We need to face into those poisons to help them to melt, and then they can make us become, bring out those beautiful qualities we all have. Because from a Buddhist perspective, we all have that. We all have the potential for enlightenment. And I guess a question we could ask is, I guess Westerners might ask, is Amitabha one of my imaginary friends? So, I think in the Western scientific world, we break down things into existing or not existing. But from a Buddhist perspective, the Buddha never spoke in those terms. He doesn't speak in terms of what exists or doesn't exist. He was very practical. It's what helps us transcend the self and take us towards enlightenment. And these archetypal figures, they're kind of gateways to something that's beyond our rational mind, because what the Buddha attained when he achieved enlightenment was so otherworldly, so alien to what ordinary people how they would see the world, that he despaired that anyone would ever understand him or get it. So he almost decided not to teach. So it just gives you an idea of how far beyond our everyday experiences. And we're on a path of transformation as Buddhists, and we just can't go from here to, gosh, I'm trying to get to something really ineffable that we can't really understand. These beautiful symbols are like gateways, so they've got some form, but they don't have the human poisons. So when I connect with it, I'm connecting with that vision, and then I stay with what falls short of it, but also the sense that I have that potential. And it's not to give myself a hard time. Everything's okay when I'm with Amitabha. It's all right. But I have this potential to move towards that beautiful qualities of unlimited love and compassion. And they exist. They exist. They are in the world. And I think maybe if you've been meditating in this shrine room, there's been years now here and many other sacred places where people have connected with these qualities. And we can feel them, yeah. It's not, it's beyond whether they exist or don't exist. And it's beyond the duality, that duality, which is what takes us to something bigger. Yeah, so that's the end of the talk, yes. I think I'll end though with my favorite song about the thread, bringing back the thread to these wonderful verses. And hatred is not conquered by hatred, it's conquered by love. And that's the thread. So there's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change. But it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist Community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a class, a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.